So she was a very broken woman when she met Prince Charles, and that was, as we all know, a terribly unhappy marriage. But she then became glamorous. She suddenly discovered her fame because she was very beautiful and very charming.
It began as another late-night monologue, delivered beneath bright studio lights to an audience expecting harmless celebrity jokes. But the moment Jimmy Kimmel mentioned Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand, the laughter changed. Behind palace doors and inside a carefully controlled California operation, phones reportedly began ringing almost immediately. At first, nothing seemed dangerous. Kimmel's tone was light, almost casual, the familiar voice of a host who had spent years turning celebrity headlines into quick bursts of laughter. The audience relaxed. Meghan's name was already enough to draw attention, but when he shifted toward her new lifestyle venture, the mood sharpened. What sounded like a harmless joke carried an uncomfortable question beneath it. Was this a serious business? Or another carefully polished chapter in a story built around royal fame? For Meghan, the brand was never just about products. It was meant to become proof that she could create something entirely her own. After years of being described through palace titles, family feuds, royal protocol, and public controversy, this was supposed to be her declaration of independence. Every image had been selected with care. Every product description had been softened and refined. Every celebrity connection suggested influence, warmth, and quiet luxury. Nothing was accidental. That was precisely what made Kimmel dangerous. A late-night comedian did not need to destroy the brand with evidence. He only needed to redefine it with one unforgettable line. Months of planning could be reduced to a single punchline, repeated across social media until the joke became more powerful than the original message. His first remark seemed playful. It drew polite laughter. Then came the second, more precise, pointing at the strange gap between the brand's elegant image and the mystery surrounding what customers could actually buy. The laughter grew louder. Kimmel moved beyond jars, labels, and domestic promises. He began joking about the identity being sold, the dream of entering Meghan's private world, touching royal glamour without stepping inside a palace. Inside the studio, the audience heard comedy. Inside Meghan's operation, advisors heard warning bells. Messages began arriving. Clips were already being prepared. Team members watched months of careful strategy become material for strangers to mock, remix, and share. Harry reportedly believed the storm might fade by morning. Late-night jokes came and went. News cycles moved quickly, but Meghan understood something more troubling. Criticism could be challenged. Ridicule was different. Once people laughed, they rarely forgot why. And Kimmel was not finished. The opening jokes were only the setup. He had saved his sharpest comparison for later, one designed to connect the brand directly to the royal life Meghan claimed to have left behind. Then, the program cut to commercial. But online, the broadcast had only just begun. The first clip was spreading faster than any statement could contain it. But to understand why a few late-night jokes could strike so deeply, the story must return to the promise Meghan's brand was meant to fulfill, and the private pressure hidden beneath its polished surface. Meghan's brand had never been intended to sell only preserves, tableware, recipes, or carefully arranged glimpses of domestic life. It was designed to sell a transformation, from controversial duchess to admired entrepreneur. Yet the greater the promise became, the more dangerous one mocking question could become. For years, Meghan had watched other people define her. Palace officials decided which traditions mattered. Newspapers decided which mistakes deserved outrage. Royal commentators turned private tensions into public judgment. Even silence was interpreted for her. The lifestyle project was supposed to end that cycle. This time, the language, the mood, and the meaning would belong to her. The brand carried her personal taste into every detail. It suggested quiet gardens, handwritten notes, carefully prepared meals, elegant gatherings, and friendships built around warmth rather than rank. It offered an image of calm control, far removed from palace corridors and family battles. Yet beneath that softness was a much harder ambition. Meghan wanted to prove she could create influence without permission from the monarchy. That ambition created the first serious problem. The more attention the brand received, the more people asked what existed behind the image. Advisors worried that the public fascination surrounding Meghan might be moving faster than the business itself. There was prestige, curiosity, and famous supporters. But questions remained about products, timing, and purpose. Was the brand strong enough to stand alone? Or was Meghan's name carrying more weight than the company? Inside the team, another debate grew sharper. Some believed her royal connection was the greatest advantage available. Others argued that leaning on it would undermine the entire message of independence. Meghan could not escape the contradiction. She wanted to present an accessible world of food, home, and hospitality. Yet everything surrounding the launch suggested exclusivity, wealth, and carefully guarded access. Harry supported her, but even he appeared uncertain about how much of their private life should be used. Personal memories created emotional connection. Royal references created attention. Stories involving their children could make the brand feel intimate, but they could also reopen battles over privacy. What looked like marketing strategy was becoming a deeply personal argument over how much of their family's story the public was still allowed to consume. For Meghan, the project had become an answer to every voice that predicted she would fail outside the palace. That made delay feel dangerous. Media figures had already questioned the limited product visibility and the mystery surrounding the business model. Her team expected criticism from columnists and royal experts. They prepared statements, talking points, and quiet defenses. What they did not prepare for was laughter. Kimmel's writers saw the same tensions immediately. The brand was polished, serious, and emotionally loaded. That seriousness made every contradiction easier to expose and every joke more powerful. The project had been built to control the conversation, but inside Kimmel's writers' room, the contradictions Meghan's team hoped to soften were being sharpened into punchlines. Hours before the broadcast, the segment was reportedly little more than a collection of headlines, product images, and unfinished jokes. Then, one writer noticed a detail that transformed the entire monologue. It was not simply about expensive products. It was about the royal image Meghan claimed to have escaped. Until that moment, the writers had been circling familiar territory. They had jokes about luxury, celebrity friendships, carefully packaged products, and the strange power of a famous name attached to an ordinary household item. But none of it felt new. Meghan and Harry had already been mocked, defended, criticized, and analyzed from every direction. Another predictable royal joke would disappear before morning. Then the contradiction became impossible to ignore. The brand spoke in the language of warmth, independence, and personal freedom, yet nearly every layer of attention surrounding it came from Meghan's connection to the monarchy. The writers studied the polished descriptions, the selective gifting, the famous supporters, and the air of controlled exclusivity. It did not resemble a rebellion against hierarchy. It looked like a new hierarchy, one built not around bloodlines and titles, but invitations, influence, and carefully chosen access. That idea changed the room. One writer compared palace ceremony with the rituals surrounding the brand. At the palace, people waited for approval, placement, and recognition. Around Meghan's venture, followers waited for products, announcements, and entry into a private circle. The structure appeared different. The feeling did not. An early joke suggested that the products mattered less than the identity attached to them. Without Meghan's name, a jar was simply a jar. With her name, it became a piece of a larger fantasy. Kimmel reportedly considered softening the material. Jokes involving Meghan and Harry could divide an audience instantly. Supporters might see cruelty. Critics might treat every punchline as confirmation. A producer warned that the segment would fail if it attacked Meghan as a person instead of examining the image being sold. So the monologue was tightened. The sharpest lines were aimed at celebrity branding, carefully managed language, and the uncomfortable gap between independence and royal fascination. Then came the crucial question: what was the company offering that customers could not already find somewhere else? The answer prepared by the writers was brutal in its simplicity. It was not selling preserves, hospitality, or domestic elegance. It was selling access to a royal story while insisting that the royal story no longer mattered. To make the joke unforgettable, the team created a mock product description. It looked polished, harmless, and absurdly refined. Yet hidden inside it was the entire argument. That image would soon become the most replayed part of the broadcast. Kimmel reviewed the final line, made one last adjustment, and stepped toward the stage. Across California, Meghan's team remained focused on controlling the brand's future, unaware that someone else was about to define it for them. When the cameras went live, the first jokes drew laughter, but it was Kimmel's carefully prepared final comparison that turned entertainment into humiliation. Kimmel paused as an image of Meghan's elegant branding appeared behind him. Then he asked the question her team had spent months avoiding. Was this truly a lifestyle company, or was it royal nostalgia packaged in expensive jars? The audience erupted before he even delivered the final line. He began gently, praising the polished lettering, the refined mood, and the promise of a warmer, more beautiful life. For a few seconds, the segment almost sounded like free promotion. Then his voice shifted. The smile remained, but the compliment became a trap. Kimmel suggested the products looked less like household essentials and more like souvenirs from a royal separation that had never completely ended. Meghan may have left palace protocol behind, he joked, but somehow she had created another world of waiting lists, private approval, and carefully selected friends. The monarchy had courtiers. Her brand had celebrity recipients. The palace controlled access through tradition. This new circle controlled it through exclusivity. Then came the image that changed everything. A fictional jar appeared with the label, Royal Relevance, now without the royals. The audience exploded. Kimmel let the laughter build before pointing out the strangest part of the launch. There seemed to be endless publicity surrounding products that almost nobody could buy. The less available the brand became, the more people talked about it. It was mystery marketed as luxury, and fame presented as substance. Then he delivered the line Meghan's advisors would fear most. The company, he suggested, was not truly selling preserves, tableware, or lifestyle advice. It was selling the feeling that ordinary customers might be one invitation away from Meghan's private circle. The joke landed because it was simple. Months of uncertainty, delayed promises, celebrity gifting, and carefully protected access were compressed into one accusation the public could instantly remember. Kimmel never attacked Meghan's appearance, family, or personal identity. That made the satire harder to dismiss. His target was the contradiction between the image and the offer. Even Harry was drawn into the routine, described as the only man who had escaped one inherited institution only to become the unpaid spokesman for another. Inside the studio, laughter rolled through the room. Inside Meghan's home and business operation, silence reportedly took over. Advisors listened for every phrase, knowing the words would soon become headlines. Meghan focused less on the laughter than on Kimmel's framing. A joke could vanish. A definition could remain. Within minutes, the fictional jar was being clipped, reposted, and turned into a meme. The company had not collapsed. Its products had not disappeared. But the illusion surrounding the brand, the idea that every detail could be controlled, had been shattered live before millions. Kimmel ended with one final playful remark and moved on. unaware that his comedy had already divided Meghan and Harry's inner circle over what should happen next. The audience heard a comedy routine, but Meghan's team heard something far more dangerous. A new public narrative forming in real time, beyond their ability to approve, edit, or erase. Before the applause had faded, Meghan's advisors reportedly faced an impossible decision. Respond publicly and give the jokes greater power, or remain silent and allow the mockery to define the brand. What followed was not merely a publicity discussion, it became a battle over Meghan's deepest fear. The first calls came almost immediately. Communications advisors joined business strategists, legal representatives, and trusted friends in a tense discussion that moved faster than anyone could control. Every person understood the danger, but they disagreed sharply over what silence would mean. One group argued that Kimmel should be ignored. Late-night comedy fed on outrage. Any statement, complaint, or legal warning would only extend the life of the segment and make Meghan appear wounded by a joke. Let the laughter pass, they insisted. By morning, another celebrity would become the target. Others believed silence was surrender. They wanted a measured response, presenting the monologue as another example of how quickly the public mocked a woman attempting to build something independently. To them, the jokes were not harmless. They reduced ambition, risk, and years of personal reinvention to a few clever lines. Meghan's reaction was not simple embarrassment. It was frustration. She had spent years fighting against identities created for her by courtiers, commentators, and strangers. Now, just as she attempted to write a new chapter, another powerful voice had turned that effort into entertainment. What troubled her most was the accuracy of the attack. Kimmel's writers had identified weaknesses usually debated only in private, limited availability, unclear timing, celebrity access, and the uneasy dependence on royal fascination. Meghan reportedly questioned whether someone familiar with early marketing discussions had spoken carelessly to journalists or entertainment contacts. Suspicion entered the room, and suddenly, the crisis felt more personal. Harry's instinct was immediate. He wanted to defend her. He had watched public narratives injure people he loved before, and silence had never felt neutral to him. But advisors warned that his involvement would prove the very accusation Kimmel had made, that Meghan's business could not escape royal drama. That warning cut deeply. Meghan also understood that attacking the host might create another problem. Every major celebrity entrepreneur faced ridicule. Responding too aggressively could make her appear unable to accept the scrutiny that came with commercial ambition. Meanwhile, partners were growing nervous. Future announcements risked being overshadowed by the fictional jar and its brutal label. Social media teams tracked the monologue's phrases as they spread from posts to headlines, each repetition making the joke feel less like satire and more like accepted truth. Then the meeting turned inward. Had the launch been rushed? Had mystery been mistaken for strategy? Had the brand promised an entire world before proving it could deliver a product? Meghan wanted an immediate answer, something strong enough to prove there was substance beneath the image. Yet another premature announcement could deepen the damage. That was when one advisor proposed a different response. No angry statement, no public feud, no mention of Kimmel. Instead, they would use the humiliation to power a dramatic relaunch and answer every joke through what the brand delivered next. Yet before Meghan could decide whether to fight back, Harry made a private move that reopened an older wound, one rooted not in television comedy, but in the monarchy they had left behind. Harry had endured hostile headlines, palace briefings, public ridicule, and years of speculation about his marriage. But hearing a studio audience laugh at Meghan's dream struck him differently. His instinct was immediate: protect her. The problem was that his protection could make the crisis even worse. To Harry, The monologue was not an isolated comedy segment. It belonged to a much older pattern. He had seen Meghan's pain turned into public entertainment before. Her mistakes were treated as proof of failure, while her achievements were questioned, minimized, or connected back to the royal title she was supposedly expected to leave behind. Now the same cycle had reached the business she hoped would represent freedom. He wanted to confront it directly. Meghan resisted. This project had to stand on her decisions, her products, and her ability to deliver. A public defense from Harry might appear loving, but it would also strengthen the accusation that every venture still relied on their royal conflict. She warned him that the brand could not become another battlefield between California and the palace. Harry heard the logic. Emotionally, he could not accept it. Without first reaching an agreement with Meghan, he contacted a trusted advisor and asked whether the monologue had crossed a line. The answer was uncomfortable. The jokes were sharp, but they targeted branding, publicity, and celebrity culture. A forceful complaint would likely create a larger story than the original broadcast. The advice echoed an old royal command: endure public mockery in silence. For years, palace figures had taught Harry that private suffering must never disturb the institution's public calm. He had been expected to ignore stories that wounded his family, trusting that silence protected the crown. But silence had never felt like protection to him. It felt like abandonment. His rejection of that rule had shaped nearly every battle that followed. Reports soon suggested that figures within royal circles viewed the controversy as a warning about celebrity exposure. The monarchy's controlled communications could be cold and restrictive, but they also limited how quickly an individual became the center of uncontrolled ridicule. Worse, Harry suspected that someone inside that world might privately enjoy seeing Meghan's independent project mocked. The palace said nothing. Yet to Harry, its silence carried judgment. He considered appearing publicly beside Meghan, offering a clear display of unity. Advisors objected. Such an appearance could transform a commercial problem into another royal spectacle, shifting attention away from the company and back toward family resentment. Meghan remained firm. Their next move had to be about performance, not sympathy. No attack on Kimmel, no palace accusations, no emotional interview. The brand would answer through products, clarity, and results. That left Harry trapped inside a painful contradiction the more strongly he tried to protect Meghan. The harder it became for her to prove she needed no royal shield. Eventually, they agreed that Harry would remain publicly silent while Meghan's team prepared a measured commercial response. But before that plan could begin, new articles appeared. Business commentators were no longer repeating jokes. They were examining delays, strategy, and substance. The jokes may have begun the crisis, but the questions that followed were more serious, and this time, laughter was replaced by a ruthless examination of the brand's promises. Once the laughter settled, commentators began examining the question hidden beneath Kimmel's jokes. What did Meghan's company actually offer, and could it survive without constant royal attention? The monologue had opened a door, and behind it waited delayed products, uncertain expectations, and unforgiving public scrutiny. The conversation changed almost overnight. What had begun as entertainment became a business investigation. Journalists wanted dates. Consumers wanted prices. Industry figures wanted to know who controlled production, how distribution would work, and whether the company had a clear identity beyond Meghan's fame. Every unanswered question now seemed more damaging than before. Each delay appeared to support Kimmel's claim that the publicity had arrived long before the products. A quiet development period could once have been explained as careful planning. After the monologue, it looked like uncertainty. Supporters pushed back. They argued that serious lifestyle companies were not built in weeks, especially when food, homeware, licensing, and retail partnerships were involved. Other celebrity businesses had also faced slow launches and public doubt, before finding success. Meghan, they insisted, deserved time to build something lasting. Critics saw it differently. They claimed the secrecy had allowed expectation to grow beyond anything the company could realistically deliver. The fewer details Meghan shared, the more the public imagined. Mystery had created excitement, but it had also created a space where mockery could thrive. Behind closed doors, the pressure intensified. Advisors and possible commercial partners wanted firmer schedules, measurable goals, and a clearer path to revenue. Meghan considered accelerating the first major release. A successful product could replace laughter with customer enthusiasm and prove the brand was more than an elegant promise. Product specialists warned her not to move too quickly. Poor packaging, limited stock, shipping failures, or weak quality control could cause damage far greater than a late-night joke. The company faced a brutal choice: move slowly and appear unprepared, or rush forward and risk confirming every criticism. There was also a deeper identity crisis. Should the brand remain rare, luxurious, and invitation-driven, or should it become accessible enough to earn broad commercial trust? Even the celebrity gifting strategy was being reconsidered. What had once seemed like natural excitement among friends was now described as a private social hierarchy, with famous insiders receiving access while ordinary customers waited outside. Meghan chose to change the language around the company. Royal suggestions would be reduced. The focus would shift toward craftsmanship, hospitality, personal stories, and products that could stand without palace history. Harry kept his promise and stepped back publicly, allowing Meghan to meet the challenge under her own name. Then came an unexpected development. Traffic surged. Searches increased. Social engagement exploded. Kimmel's jokes had wounded the brand's prestige, but they had also delivered exposure no paid campaign could easily match. Meghan now prepared her answer. Not an angry statement, but a carefully timed move meant to replace the fictional jar with something real. Now the crisis had reached its final question. Would Meghan answer humiliation with another polished promise, or reveal enough substance to transform ridicule into momentum? Meghan's response did not arrive as a furious interview or a carefully worded denial. Instead, she chose a more dangerous strategy. She allowed the public to judge the brand through what it delivered next. But even success would come with a painful truth she could no longer avoid. The countermove was controlled, deliberate, and far more serious than an angry statement. Meghan's team announced a limited product release supported by a carefully chosen commercial partnership, clear ordering details, and a promise that customers would finally experience the brand rather than merely hear about it. There was no mention of Jimmy Kimmel, no accusation, no demand for an apology. The message was unmistakable: the answer to comedy would be execution. Interest returned immediately. Supporters praised the quality, the presentation, and the restraint of Meghan's response. Some consumers argued that the launch proved the company had real substance beneath the polished language. Others were less forgiving. The fictional jar and its brutal label continued to appear beneath announcements, reviews, and promotional posts. Even as the brand moved forward, the joke followed. That became the price of survival. Kimmel's monologue had permanently entered the story of the company. Meghan could refuse to acknowledge it, but she could not erase it. The attack had damaged the aura of perfection surrounding the launch, yet it had also introduced the brand to millions who might otherwise never have searched for it. Humiliation and publicity had become impossible to separate. Harry felt private relief as positive reactions began to appear. But he also understood why he had been forced to remain in the background. Meghan needed to survive this moment without using him, royal conflict, or public sympathy as protection. The victory had to belong to her. Across the Atlantic, the palace remained silent. Still, people close to royal circles were said to be watching. Meghan's venture had become a test of whether she could build lasting influence beyond the institution that once defined her. For Meghan, the deeper lesson was painful. Independence did not mean freedom from judgment. It meant facing judgment without palace advisors, inherited authority, or royal machinery controlling the response. The company had not been destroyed. What Kimmel destroyed was the fantasy that fame, elegance, and perfect branding could make any project untouchable. Meghan emerged more determined, but less protected by illusion. She now had to separate commercial success from personal validation. For Kimmel, it had been another monologue. For Meghan, it became a crisis she would carry into every future launch. Whether the controversy marked a collapse, a reinvention, or the beginning of a more aggressive chapter remained unclear. But rumors surrounding the next release suggested one carefully chosen detail might contain a silent message for every critic who laughed that night. Because in the world Meghan and Harry now inhabit, the most dangerous royal battles are no longer fought inside throne rooms. They unfold through brands, broadcasts, laughter, and the stories millions choose to believe.